Hello, assalamu alaikum, Sasri Akal, namaste. Hello, my name is Farheen Khan and you're watching the AZEEZA show. And this week we're actually going to be speaking about a topic that has come up in the media quite recently, and I think it's a conversation that we need to have on polygamy and family law. So with me in our studio today is Sabah Hazai, and Sabah, thank you so much for being here in the show.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Wonderful. So do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself, Sabah?
So my name is Sabah Hazai. I'm the founder of Clarity Law Group. I started the practice 7 years ago. I practice in the areas of corporate law, and I also do a lot of work with Canadian Muslim families in navigating the criminal law and family law system.
Okay, great, wonderful. So Sabah, tell us. I know that you and we've talked about this sort of offline. You've participated in a documentary that came out recently on the issue of polygamy with the Fifth Estate, right, and CBC. So how can you tell us a little bit about what that experience was like?
So I participated in that documentary that CBC was doing on the Fifth Estate. As a member of the Canadian Council of Muslim Women, I'm a member on the national board, and also as a lawyer with extensive experience helping Muslim families in addressing their legal challenges in the areas of family law.
Right.
And the reason that I chose to participate, and I'm very happy that that documentary was completed and done, because it was a conversation that needed to be started in the community about the issue of polygamy and the impact that it's having on Canadian Muslim families, particularly women and children.
Right. And can you tell us what your sense was when you saw the document? What are the issues? Let's talk about that. What is for our audience, what's the issue around polygamy?
So the issue around polygamy is that polygamy is illegal in Canada, and it is a crime.
Right.
And unfortunately, we have been the CCMW and myself and other members of the community have been seeing this practice of polygamy emerging and becoming more of an issue and creating a crisis for women and children.
Right.
So, and the challenge that we're facing is that it's not permissible in this country. It's against the law. And it's being used as a religious right.
Right.
And that's a challenge,
for sure,
because it's not a right that's guaranteed to anybody. It's illegal in this country, and engaging in the practice of polygamy as a religious belief is incorrect.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's, I think the story was very successful in getting that point across.
And I mean, for those who haven't seen the documentary, basically the documentary was about looking at different cases, right, of situations that are happening in Canada, of even prominent people in the community who have engaged in this sort of issue, right? And
I don't have as many details on what the CBC investigation itself entailed.
Right.
I was invited to it as a legal expert.
For sure.
And from what I understand from the documentary is that CBC undertook a very extensive investigation.
Okay.
And what they found was that, and they were approached by Canadian Muslim women that were facing this situation.
Right.
They also conducted an investigation of certain imams that are actually endorsing this practice.
Right. And what is your sense of what was the reaction of the people? What was the way in which this was? Do you think it makes sense for this type of a discussion to happen, for this documentary to happen at this moment in time, particularly because of the political climate and the way in which Muslims are being viewed?
The concern that I had and many others had was the issue of Islamophobia, that this was going to fuel that anti-Muslim, anti-Islam sentiment.
Right.
And that has, as a Canadian Muslim woman, it's something that myself and other women have had to balance. Is, do we speak up? Do we access just our rights and access to justice? Or do we keep it quiet and we keep it within the community? And we did try to keep it, we did try to keep it with the community. We did reach out to religious leaders, I myself did, to say this is a problem. And it's a problem that is putting women and children especially into a very precarious situation.
For sure.
And it has to be addressed.
Right.
And if the issue is that a lot of these families are accessing religious leaders, religious centers for support.
Right.
And we need to ensure that these individuals, as the religious leaders, are trained to provide information about legal services and legal rights.
Right.
But they are not trained to provide legal advice.
No, absolutely right.
And that unfortunately has been a problem, because the individuals that I've helped, and I've worked with men and women, is that the first point of contact when there's a crisis, a personal crisis, is reaching out to a spiritual leader.
Right.
And they're not, the individuals that I've dealt with and that CCMW deals with aren't always being given accurate information.
Right.
And that's creating disastrous situations.
And that happens a lot.
And it happens a lot.
Yep.
And, you know, reaching out to religious leaders and scholars was not meant to corner anybody. The idea was to say, if you need support and you need training or you need access to more information,
right. And when you're supporting other people,
when you're supporting a Canadian Muslim family in crisis.
Right.
And that's the key. The key to that is it's a Canadian Muslim family.
Right.
And we cannot create two plural systems.
Right.
Canada has laws.
Yep.
Those laws are based on equality, equity, and what's in the best interest of the children.
Right.
In my years of practice, and the work that I do with CCMW, and that CCMW has been engaged in this dialogue for decades, is that Canadian Muslim families, especially Canadian Muslim women, need accurate information and support.
Right.
And unfortunately, they're not getting that. I've dealt with women that are facing challenges where they're going and they're accessing services at the mosque, and instead of being given support or being given advice, they're being told to go home and pray.
Right. or you know, in situations around domestic violence, it's like, oh, be patient, you know,
Yes.
I'll reward you for that.
Yes,
Right.
and you know, telling a woman in crisis that you should go home and pray, when she's finally brought herself to a point where she realizes that she needs support, and telling her to go home and pray and sending her back into a dangerous situation, that's not acceptable.
Agreed, yeah.
If it has to do with training, if it has to do with a lack of understanding about the supports that are available to the Canadian Muslim community, then that needs to be articulated by the centers and the scholars.
Right.
Because there's a very, very strict line between giving spiritual advice and giving legal advice.
Agreed, yeah.
One of the things that I want all Canadian Muslim families to know is, if you're in crisis, please don't negotiate agreements through the assistance of people who are not legal professionals.
Right.
It's detrimental and it can be very disastrous. We have a legal system in place. It has due process.
For sure.
And again, it's based on equality, equity, and the best interest of the children. And the laws in this country don't compromise your spiritual rights.
Right, exactly.
And that's a key distinction to know. Because something that I'm facing a lot, and CCMW faces, is inaccurate information given under the guise of spiritual advice.
Right, exactly.
And that's a problem.
Right. That's right. And nobody's saying that, you know, you can't continue to be spiritual, or that you can't, you know, do the things that are being suggested as well, as far as like praying and, you know, trying to remain spiritually connected when you're going through crisis. Fine.
Yes.
Those are things that are coping mechanisms. That's great.
Yes.
But where we're being clear is to say that when it comes to legal decisions and legal matters, make sure that you're getting the advice from the right people.
Yes, you need to be informed. And our faith as Muslims our spirituality, it's a major component of who we are. And we live in a country that supports that.
For sure.
We don't need to hide it. It doesn't need it to be hidden in a mosque, okay? In the courts. I deal with judges, opposing counsel, who respect the faith, they respect the requirements, but are sometimes, they're not heard. The promotion of the rights available to Canadian Muslim families, especially Canadian Muslim women, is not reaching them.
Right.
And that's the work that CCMW has been working on, like I said, for decades,
Right.
is making sure that Canadian Muslim women and Canadian Muslim men have access to information about their family law rights.
Right. Okay. So, with respect to the issue of polygamy, if I can tell, polygamy is one issue, right? Where people are basically taking multiple wives.
Yes.
Why do you think that is the case?
The case, well, I have two perspectives on that. One is as a Canadian Muslim woman, and I have no tolerance for that. If my husband ever came to me and said that he wanted a polygamous marriage, our marriage would be over. I would absolutely not accept that. The women that I'm dealing with that are either impacted by this as first wives or second wives,
Right.
a lot of times don't even know that this is happening.
Absolutely. I want to just take a quick moment to take a quick break, and then we'll be
Okay.
back. Okay, we'll be back right after this. Hi everyone, welcome back to the AZEEZA show. We're just talking about the issue of polygamy. So Sabah, we were just talking about why is it that people are engaging in this issue of polygamy?
So, like I was telling you earlier, the women that I deal with oftentimes are not aware
Right.
that their husbands have taken a second wife,
Right.
and sometimes there's second wives that are not aware that they are second wives.
Yes, yes.
And that is a serious problem for many reasons.
Right.
The first one obviously is that, especially for the second wives and the third wives, is they don't if they're not aware that they're not legally married, then that impacts their family law rights.
Right.
And
Okay.
that means that they could be impacted when the marriage breaks down. They don't have the legal support of the country and laws,
Right.
and they may be considered common law.
Right.
And for the first wife, obviously it's devastating.
Yeah, absolutely.
And another
Yeah.
challenge with that is the children. We have many children that have been raised in this environment. And I've dealt with young people who they're torn, and it's about their faith because they're being raised and told that their father has a right to be married to two women. And that's not true.
Right.
The conditions for that do not exist here in this country.
Yeah, for sure.
And if, say that for argument's sake, that, that there was a permissibility for this, our faith requires justice. If you
Absolutely.
can't give a woman her legal rights and a legal standing as your wife, where's the justice?
Yeah.
How are you treating these women fairly? How are you treating your children fairly?
Yeah.
Because children of a second marriage may face complications when it comes to estate issues.
Yeah.
And I've seen that as well.
Right.
Property rights,
Right.
that's compromised, and it's illegal.
Right.
It's illegal in this country.
Absolutely.
And it's being justified as it's a right, it's a religious right. It's not a religious right.
No, it's not.
It's illegal in the country. It's not your religious right to get married. One of the things that I'm finding very challenging is imams that are actually conducting these marriages.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
if
absolutely.
a registered officiant with the ministry should not
Absolutely. Should not at all.
be doing anything that does not comply with the Marriage Act
For sure.
or the appointment, his appointment as an officiant,
Right.
right? And by doing so and justifying it as a religious right of a man that's been given to him as a divine right from Allah, that is it's unacceptable.
No, and
and the
even-
reasons that have been given
Yeah.
are the wife is She's too busy raising the children. She's not meeting the man's sexual desires. She's not attractive anymore. She's aging. I have men who say that they have an addiction to pornography.
Yeah, I've heard
and
about
this
that,
is
yeah.
an excuse so that they won't partake in being unfaithful or committing adultery. It's polygamy. This isn't a license to commit adultery and have sex outside of your marriage.
Yeah.
Because it just doesn't make any sense.
No, exactly. And even if you look at, I mean, I'm not a religious scholar by any means, but even if you
Neither
look
am I.
at, no, but even if you look at if you look back at the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, his life, he was in a monogamous marriage with Khadija radiallahu anha for many years, right? And then in terms of like his, in later years after she passed away, when he did get into other marriages, it was because there were specific things, there were reasons for it, right?
That's right.
It wasn't, there were many reasons. There were like, things of trying to overcome tribal, rivalries and this and that. There were distinct reasons why he married different women at different times.
Right.
And so it was never about
It had
sexual
nothing to do with
desire.
sexual desires and
Yes,
needs.
it was never about that.
Yes, it wasn't about
this
that.
notion of like, I remember several years ago there was even an article that was published in the Toronto Star, and it was the same kind of thing, right? Well, somebody was quoted in there, if I remember correctly, saying that, well, men have several different sexual needs and therefore they need multiple women to fulfill these needs. Like, that's nonsense, right?
It's unacceptable.
Yeah.
And it is nonsense. And then the issue is, Canadian Muslim women are citizens of this country.
Mm-hmm.
They are Muslims as well. They have rights that are their divine rights, based on the religion, based on our faith.
Right.
And they have rights as Canadian citizens under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
Mm-hmm.
So what about Canadian women's rights, Canadian Muslim women's rights?
Yeah, absolutely. What about them?
What about
Exactly.
them?
And that's one of the things I think, if we look at just marriage in general, I remember years ago, Dr. Ingrid Mattson had I was in Chicago, I think, for the big ISNA convention, the Islamic convention, and I remember at 6 a.m. they had a marriage contract session with her, and she was talking about what to explicitly put into marriage contracts. And I kid you not, it was 6 in the morning, it was the only time they were running that session for whatever reason, and the room was full. There were probably like 200 women in that room, right? It was packed because everybody wanted to hear about what it was, what was necessary, what was important to, like, what were the questions that needed to be asked, what were the stipulations that should have been included, right? But it's so rare to see something like that, where that education's happening.
And I'm really glad that you bring that up, because the Canadian Council of Muslim Women, we
Right.
have created a legal, like a nikah kit,
Okay.
and that kit it's meant as a guide, it's not meant as legal advice. Any legal documents should be entered into with legal advice from a lawyer.
Right.
But that guide is a fantastic resource for young couples or anybody who's planning on getting married, because it allows you to think about your marriage, think about what provisions you would like to include in that, and an opportunity to understand each other's expectations.
For sure.
And another thing to think about is and I'm finding this a lot, is meher issues that are ending marriages.
Right, really.
Because, it's a nikah that hasn't been properly completed. I see that too many times. I've seen that too much.
Right.
And, the amount of the meher not being properly documented.
Right.
And people really need to start paying more attention to the nikah paper itself and the religious ceremony.
Yeah.
Like, please, if you're going to get married, make sure you have a marriage license. Make sure you've sat down with the imam. Make sure that the imam understands your expectations. Make sure that both parties, the bride and the groom, not just the bride and her father, her brother, bride, groom, everybody's family is sitting down and having a conversation. What is the meher? What are the other stipulations that we want to put in here? And make sure that the imam is properly documenting that.
Right.
And then also make sure that that marriage is registered and you're following up with the imam to confirm that that has been done.
Right.
That's critical, because when these issues come up, I see them, and it's really sad that you have a couple that got together, two families that merged together with good intentions, and one document that was not reviewed by the individual that was responsible for conducting the nikah has created a problem and ended the marriage.
Right. Yeah.
So please, the CCMW has many publications. We have a position paper on polygamy. We have resource guides for Canadian Muslim women. Those should be checked out.
Excellent. And I know that there's a family law project as well that CCMW is currently conducting.
Yes.
So what, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
We are currently working on a project for the awareness of Canadian, for Canadian Muslim women to become more aware and increase their knowledge about their rights under the Canadian laws.
Okay.
And also to understand their rights as Muslim women.
Right. Okay.
So we're very excited about that. We've just conducted our national survey, and we are going to be moving into the next phase of training professionals and legal service providers, and we hope religious scholars on providing them the resources so that they're properly equipped to talk about Canadian family law and provide information or refer families in crisis to the proper sources.
And for like women, I know that there's women that have come out to reach out to me as well that you know, have dealt with this issue of polygamy in particular. Many things, but this is in particular sort of come up both in the case of being a first wife versus a second wife. What do you say to women that are going through this? Because it's often so hard to come forward, right?
What I'm telling these women is that you live in Canada and we have a legal system and a process here to support you, and there are resources here to support you through this process. The first thing that I make sure when I'm dealing with a woman in crisis is to make sure that she's safe. That's the first thing. The second important thing is, please, don't sign anything under distress or coercion that could be construed as a legal document. The first element when I'm advising anybody when it comes to a marital breakdown is financial disclosure. Whether you work or not, Canada, in this country, family assets they belong to both the husband and the wife. Contributions are not made just by the person who earns, they're also made by the person who's running the family and raising the children.
Exactly.
So financial disclosure, understanding what are the assets of the family, understanding financial documents, assets, business accounts, employment, all of that, that should be reviewed and provided full, frank disclosure before anybody signs anything. And again, equality, Canada's laws are based on equality, equity, and the best interest of the children.
Perfect. Well, we've just run out of time, so I want to just say thank you so much for being here. Thank you for having this really important conversation, and hopefully we'll see you again.
Thank you very much for having me on the show and for helping this conversation and dialogue continue. And the last thing that I'd like to add, if you have viewers that have any inquiries or are coming forward, please ask them to contact us at info@ccmw.com.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, everyone. So thank you again for watching, and it's definitely something to consider and to ponder. For those who know somebody who's going through this, please feel free to reach out. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.